My wife asked me an interesting question recently. She asked if Jared Fogle, convicted sex offender, can eat Subway sandwiches while he's in prison. For anyone who doesn't remember, Jared was Subway's pitchman. He'd lost a bunch of weight eating Subway sandwiches, and so they used him in their advertising campaigns until in 2015 he was arrested and convicted for possession of child pornography and traveling to have sex with a minor. He received a sentence of 15 years and 8 months for his crimes. He'll have to serve 13 on that. He'll get out in 2028. That's 7 years from now. Jared will be out. For most people, the answer to can he eat Subway in prison would be an obvious no. I mean, they don't have a Subway there on the prison grounds, and it's not like they're going to let him leave and go to a Subway. In reality, they have something at most prisons called a food sale. This is a process by which inmates are allowed to order food from fast food places, outside distributors, and have it delivered to them. I know a lot about the process of doing a food sale because while I was housed at Chowchilla, I'd been helping an inmate prepare for board. One of the things that I noticed in this inmate's file was that he had arranged a food sale, having the proceeds donated to a battered women's shelter. The reason he'd done this is because he'd been convicted of spousal battery as one of his crimes, and he wanted to demonstrate his remorse to the parole board. Getting to go through his paperwork really drove home how complex a food sale is. He first had to contact the women's shelter and ask them to contact KFC. KFC had to prepare a menu of food items that they would be willing to sell in bulk because you can't order just anything off the menu. It has to be stuff they're willing to do a lot of. The charity, the women's shelter, had then printed up these menus and tacked on a 20% surcharge to all of the food items, which would be the 20% that the charity would receive as a donation. They'd printed up hundreds and hundreds of these menus and delivered them to the prison. The inmate had had these menus delivered to all of the different cells with the warden's approval. Inmates had filled out the food items that they wanted to buy and signed a statement saying that they were willing to have money taken out of their personal accounts and put into an escrow. The charity then took these menus, had them filled by KFC, and had the food items delivered to the prison whenever the escrow was completed and the money was delivered to KFC. This is a pretty complex process, but it's really a win-win if you think about it. KFC gets to sell a whole bunch of chicken to people that ordinarily couldn't go there. The inmates get to eat some decent food, and best of all, the charity gets just thousands of dollars for very little work on their part in order to, in this case, help some women who probably desperately needed it. But then you think about Jared Fogle, his feet kicked up on his desk, eating a Subway sandwich, laughing to his cellie about some of the nasty stuff he did. Let's not mince words. The man's a monster, a pedophile. Something doesn't sit right, the idea he can just order any old special food he wants and get it. So I did some research on where Jared Fogle is serving his time. Apparently he's at Inglewood Federal Penitentiary. And I actually found a quote from somebody named Mark Brooks who did time with Jared about what it's like, and I'm just going to go ahead and read what he said. It's like Club Fed. They've got a movie theater, a fully equipped gym with weights, ellipticals, stairmasters, cable weights. Outside they have a baseball field, a tennis court, a soccer field, a horseshoe pit, bocce ball court, and cornhole. He got his culinary arts certificate. It's more like a daycare than a prison. And just whenever I was really starting to gnash my teeth, this idea that the feds have this cush prison set aside for high-profile sex offenders, where they can play baseball and eat Subway and watch movies in a theater, I came across this picture. That's a picture of Stephen Nigg, a gentleman who saw Jared on the prison yard and walked up and punched him in the face repeatedly, bloodied his nose, scratched his neck up. He gave a statement. He said, "I wanted to get justice for the victims and their families." You see, he was serving a sentence of 15 years for being a felon in possession of a firearm. And he felt that it was unreasonable that Jared, who had molested children, was serving the same prison sentence and not something far more serious. After hearing about this, I started imagining in my head what it would be like the day that Jared got his Subway sandwiches and some creepy little sex offender was looking at his pile of food that he'd gotten, and some tough guy like Stephen Nigg walked up and said, "Hey, those are mine." And I looked online, and you're not going to believe this, but my dream is a reality. This really happened, and I have a clip of it, and I just have to share this. I don't want to seem like I'm endorsing violence against anybody, even a sex offender, even a monster like Jared. Violence is not the answer, and I realize it's aesthetically pleasing. It seems like justice that somebody who victimized people that were so much weaker than him would then be victimized by somebody so much stronger than him. That Stephen Nigg might have taken this guy to the dirt and just beaten him within an inch of his life. It feels like justice. But the fact of the matter is that it's not actually solving the problem. You see, the problem isn't that Jared hadn't had his nose broken. The problem is that he's getting out so soon after committing such heinous crimes. And not just him, that so many sex offenders are convicted and then get out in just a couple of years with no real changes to their patterns of behavior. That's not solved by violence, and it's not solved outside of the law. The way that we solve an issue like that is by raising our voices, talking about the problem, and contacting the people in authority. Write a letter to a congressperson. Contact a victims' rights organization. Anything that I can do, that we can do, to make it so that this problem is acknowledged and hopefully fixed. Because if we ignore how soon monsters like Jared are released from prison, we may be sad to discover that they're released to our communities, and that then our children are their potential victim pool.